Brian, stop me if you've heard this one before, but if you're going to introduce Matt Murdock into a universe, why not bring him in as a lawyer? Am I right? We'll be talking about that and more this week here on the podcast. This is the Superhero Pantheon. Now on this podcast, we take 3 episodes of the Fox Kids version of Spider-Man that aired in the mid-90s and discuss/review. This is not for Pantheon eligibility, but a fun side project. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps. Through the real world, we strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5-star review so as to help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at the real world are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you can do so by following us on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. Brian is my co-host. You can find him on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. Brian, all I can say is this week is a definite mixed bag. Specifically, episode 5 might be the worst thing that we've reviewed up to this point in terms of Spider-Man, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. But this week we were introduced in the animated universe to the Green Goblin. We were also Daredevil in the last episode that we are reviewing this week. So pretty exciting stuff. And again, Brian, we're introducing Matt Murdock as a lawyer in Marvel, something that we've had a chance to talk about on at least 2 other occasions.
Oh boy, so this makes me think, since you mentioned an Incredible Hulk movie, Matt Murdock was the lawyer for Bruce Banner, and we also got him as the lawyer for Peter Parker here. It makes me think we're going to get him in the She-Hulk show because that's a legal comedy, so it just seems to fit, right? Right?
I think there's a distinct possibility that there is a Matt Murdock cameo. Does that show take place in New York?
I would assume so because if they're next to Hulk and his, the Avengers Tower or wherever Hulk is staying, if they're close by, it's got to be the East Coast, right?
I guess we're going to find that out soon enough, but let us talk about Sins of the Father, Episode 4. Brian, something I really did appreciate is that Sins of the Father has had multiple meanings. And in this case, we are talking about the sins of one Norman Osborn. We get Norman Osborn racing against the clock, being yelled at by Kingpin. One of my favorite things, this is a small thing, J. Jonah Jameson is a stockholder in Oscorp, but he is also responsible for reporting on them. And I know what you're thinking, that is a clear conflict of interest. But I'll be honest, Brian, in 2022, seems like something that could absolutely happen.
God, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, like, this kind of changes how I feel about Jameson, the Jameson character in the show, because I feel like, man, after all the shit that these people have done, you're still on the board with them? Like, what? What? And then, like, you're causing more problems by reporting on their misdoings, but it's like you're trying to protect your assets too? It's like very confusing, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I guess that's 2022 for you, where you could just have so many conflict of interest with so many different interests and personal interests combined on this one board for Oscorp, and I just was kind of blown away. I was like, Jameson, what are you doing, man? So that kind of shocked me, to be honest, man, because I don't know. Despite what we've seen of the J. Jonah Jameson character, like, and especially what we find out later on about who was funding Peter Parker's legal funds, and later in the next couple episodes, is like, I can't tell if this is a bad guy or not anymore, and it's very conflicting, and I guess that's the point. But again, as a kid, you really don't pick up on a small detail like this, especially like, oh, what's a board? You know what I mean? Like as a 5-year old, like what's a board? And then you grow up and find out the board of directors and the and stockholders and all that thing. And Jameson is like one of the investors. Is very very conflicting. So it made me feel very 50-50 on the character because I was leaning towards that. Maybe he's just a good guy and he's just really like a hard ass and he's just really rough on Peter. But this is a really big conflict of interest. So I don't know.
So we get Norman Osborn, not unlike the 2002 Spider-Man. We got Norman Osborn volunteering himself, causing a giant explosion. Spider-Man goes for the save, and it looks like Harry is driving a cab, and I guess he abandons the cab or drives over to the warehouse. Spider-Man almost gets blasted with a huge amount of chemicals. Harry somehow is able to navigate New York traffic and get there in time, and a fateful line is uttered. There's no way his dad could have survived, which, of course, then creates a mystery because shortly after the disappearance of one Norman Osborn, we get the appearance of the Green Goblin. And Brian, I'm not gonna lie, this is not a good mystery. I knew it was Norman the whole time. Like you did too, right? You clearly knew it was Norman and not Harry, right?
Oh, of course, and they did everything in their power to make you think it was Harry. So I appreciate that because that's that's the writers showing that they're really trying to like get this make it not so obvious. Because if they're showing you like all these things, it's like this guy's obviously behind the mask, and then it turns out it's Norman. They did everything in their power to trick you, but we just gotta see through those tropes sometimes. But I did like the fact that Harry was desperately trying to like help his father out, and then dig through the mystery of it all. So it just shows you that Harry is kind of this tragic figure, and Norman is just kind of like that's where the sins of the father comes from, and then the son obviously is going to have to deal with those sins coming up later on for sure. But I'd like this little detail with Harry about how much he cares about his dad and that relationship, and it's very conflicting. You know what I mean, considering what we've seen in the past. And yeah, I thought that was really good, and it was pretty funny with the New York traffic thing. But at the same time, it's like animated show, they have to get through all that stuff. But again, it's like they put all these things in the show that really don't make sense in terms of New York traffic or all those New York things. But again, they're just doing it for fun. So
Yeah, I like that Harry is at the there. So there's a meeting to replace Norman as the CEO of Oscorp, and I love that Harry rightfully calls them all out on their shit. I very much appreciated them doing that, and the fact that Kingpin actually agrees with Harry is also pretty amusing because, of course, Kingpin is a bad person, but if Kingpin has his own reasons for wanting to do this. Kingpin then tells somebody to deliver the gas now because that matters to him. Getting the chemicals matters to him more than human life. Mary Jane says Harry won't return her calls. A very important question for you, Brian. Is Peter kind of the cuckold in this situation? Because it kind of feels like that sometimes.
oh, it gets even better in the next couple episodes when they sneaking around and getting kissed in the closet when Harry's outside. But yeah, this is getting real interesting. I love this. This is probably the best part of this season is this love triangle, and all these little details that happen get really, really interesting. And yeah, man, I don't know. It just feels like he's almost waiting, knowing that Harry's gonna fuck up, which I don't know, which seems kind of even more fucked up. Kind of waiting on your friend to fuck up with the girl so you can go swoop in and take the girl, but that's what it seems to be, and that's kind of what happened. So very unfortunate for Harry of what's to come. But Peter Parker was just kind of waiting on the sidelines, being the cuckold, and kind of waiting to swoop in.
Harry is very rude to Peter, so that naturally makes us want to think, oh, it's Harry that's the Green Goblin. But the Green Goblin, who is Norman Osborn, goes on a rampage and captures every single member of the board. And it reminded me of Dogma and Shazam. Did you get those same vibes as he was capturing the board and bringing them together?
Dogma, yes, but then we talked about Shazam all those years ago, and it reminded me of that. So yeah, because we were like talking about Dogma before we were recording, just coincidentally. So him just going through each and every one and just fucking like laying waste like to them verbally. I thought that was great. But then the weird thing was is like they were all chained up, and then I was like, couldn't Kingpin just bust out right now? And then he's like, the titanium I put on your fucking on your chains, Kingpin, you can't get out. And then Spider-Man just rips it off like it was nothing. So I don't know what the science is there, but
I am fine with Spider-Man being stronger than Kingpin. Like I think the idea is that Kingpin is naturally strong, like he's a big guy, but he has his limitations. Whereas Spider-Man, when he is using his powers, just has fewer limitations in terms of strength.
I guess so, because it seemed like he could have just ripped it off easily and Kingpin would have been out of there. But they went out of their way to give us that line to not, to show that he's stuck in there and he can't get out. So I mean, I guess I appreciate a little detail, but I thought it was really weird that poor Kingpin was standing there. I'm thinking like, God damn, he's strong as fuck. Burst out of there, and then Spider-Man just had to save him. So, but that dogma scene, yeah, he was just laying into him one by one. And I think around this time, is this the part where the Green Goblin like disables the fucking web shooters with his hands, and I was just screaming to myself.
Yes, that's one of the best moments in the entire show is when he does that. There's actually a couple of things that I really liked with the Green Goblin. You are all charged with crimes of hypocrisy. That is a great line, and the reason that I love that line is because he's absolutely right. We once again have a Spider-Man villain either exhibiting tragedy or being correct about something. I absolutely, absolutely love that. The other thing, my favorite line, which is a bit of fat shaming, so I do have to say that there is a caveat to this, Brian, but when he tells Kingpin, "Your sins are only exceeded by your girth," I loved that line with all my heart.
Yeah, that was great. I was laughing my ass off too because I'm a big guy and I found it funny, so I understand the concept behind the joke and the way that it relates to Kingpin and all that. But for me, the web shooter thing was just kind of like, oh, I think Sam Raimi watched that and had the same reaction I did. I'm just like, okay, we're making it natural where Spider-Man doesn't have to be in this situation ever again. Because I feel like any villain can just do that now. Just like, here's your web shooters, I'm gonna crush him, and then just crush him, and then he doesn't have his web shooters anymore. So I kind of went on to say, we've talked about this before. We're kind of divided on this. I know you're pro web shooter. I'm more natural web shooter, and I know Sam Raimi is too. Because in that exact moment, I'm thinking like, there's no like, come on, man. Like the Rhino could have done that. You know what I mean? Venom could have done that, and no one's done that until now.
I think that I think what Sam Raimi did was fine for the story that he was telling. I would also tell you that I think the way that John Watts did it with Tom Holland also works because Tom Holland is kind of Iron Man Jr., so having him create web shooters for himself makes a lot more sense. So I'm fine with it either way. I think the part that bothers me, it just feels like every episode Spider-Man has his web shooters disabled or they run out. I think that's where my problem comes in, and that's kind of where I come down on it. We once again, Goblin almost explodes himself, which was a pretty amusing moment in the episode. Spider-Man gets a nice another verbal shot at Jameson for once again saving him, thus proving that Spider-Man is a very magnanimous person. Spider-Man unmasks Goblin and Norman. I have to be honest, Brian, this was very Scooby-like.
That's just kind of natural at this point. Anytime you see a weird person in a mask and someone takes it off, everyone thinks of Scooby Doo at this point. I think that's just kind of a natural thing, but I get you. And this is where we're kind of tying the Hobgoblin, I guess. I feel like they kind of just wasted time with the Hobgoblin and should have just went straight to the Green Goblin because even Spider-Man was confused. Like, I thought you were the Hobgoblin. I thought you were who is this and blah blah blah. And it just made him more confusing. I think. I think they just should have just skipped those previous Hobgoblin episodes altogether and just did the Green Goblin because it just feels like less confusing and more focused and not this other bullshit of like, well, who's this other guy then that was in the suit?
Well, I think the Hobgoblin is much more evil. Like I think he is just pure evil, whereas with Green Goblin there's the tragic part of it that he is Norman Osborn. So I think that's the difference in the two characters. I appreciate the fact that they did take a few seconds to explore the difference between the two of them, and also that Hobgoblin's costume is the Green Goblin's costume, except it just manifests and becomes green. So we get the duality of Jekyll and Hyde. Again, we're coming back to horror references. Thus, it's something that we've talked about just about in every episode of this podcast that this show and the writers clearly huge fans of horror movies. Goblin's strength eventually runs out. Spider-Man does save Norman because, again, very magnanimous. Harry finds them and explains the secret lab, which one of the most important questions I had, Brian, was how did Green Goblin get a lair so fast? And Harry Osborn actually takes the time to explain it, which I appreciated. Norman says they're out of the chemical business. Kingpin agrees. Norman announces that his son will be by his side. We'll table that. We get some more Peter cuckolding. And Felicia kisses Spider-Man to end the episode.
Yeah, you know me and my feelings about Felicia. She's my MVP of the series in terms of the female love interest, even more so than MJ. Because we'll fight season 4, man. She becomes the Black Cat, and becomes a badass. So that's why I love her. But here it's kind of like a tease. It's like she's teasing him, knowing that he can't really. Because in the beginning of the next episode, it picks up where that kiss leaves off, and basically tells her, "I can't have a girlfriend," and blah blah blah. It's too dangerous. Blah blah blah. You'll be in danger. And I thought it was funny. I thought it was fun. She gets the kiss out of him, and even though she knows that they can't go further, it's just kind of like, here's a kiss. Think about it for a while, and we'll go from there. Then it kind of blossoms into something in the season 4, so it's not like it was like a random kiss. So I like it actually tied into something. And it just shows again, Spider-Man is still human, and he's still dealing with all these relationships with all these different females, and then having his best friend be in love with, or being in love with one of his love interests too, and then it adds to that. So this love triangle becomes this kind of love square kind of thing. So it's getting really juicy, man. I dig it.
All right, Brian, we need to talk about episode 5. I think this is the worst episode of the series up to this point, and I have a couple reasons for saying that. Number one, I think that in almost every case, the villain has either been a notable Spider Man villain, so they kind of have a bit of a reputation. There is also the aspect of this story, when you think about it, like, again, we come back to the idea of horror. There's really no horror elements in this episode. There are a lot of, like, there's clearly, like, trying to make some sort of a connection to, like, racial issues, which this is coming very shortly after things like Rodney King. I would imagine maybe O.J. Simpson perhaps has an influence on this as well. But Brian, I have to tell you, this episode is very, very bad, and I don't really enjoy it. We're not going to spend very much time talking about it. There are a couple highlights that I do want to point out, but I feel like singularly, this is the worst episode of the series to this point.
So I did some quick research on this episode because I was just kind of like confused. Like, is Rocket Racer like a new character for the show or whatever? Turns out Rocket Racer was created in like 77, 78, so he's been around for a while. And that look and design, I know that look and design of the character looks like something from Burger King toys of 1996, which would fit the era perfectly, like perfectly. But he was actually designed in like the 70s, so I was kind of like, wow, blown away. Because if you look at like the Burger King toys from this era, they look like the Rocket Racer guy. So I was just like, well, this kind of fits for the time being. Also, I did some additional research, and from the consensus from a lot of the Spider-Man the Animated Series fans, this is the like voted worst episode of the series, like the like worst episode. And there's like another episode that we haven't watched yet that's almost as bad, but this is by far the worst. And it sucks because again, like they're trying to do this racial commentary about how like Spider-Man doesn't know what it's like to be in the hood or whatever, and doesn't know what it's like to be like to have like certain choices put upon you, and how like this kid got caught with money on the ground and they accused him stealing it, and then it just kind of causes him to like, well, if they're gonna accuse me of being a criminal even though I didn't do it, I might as well just do the crime, and it leads to that kind of discussion. But on the other hand, there's all this weird shit going on with like a giant robotic wheel that's destroying the city that apparently is causing so much damage. Because if you look at that thing, it was destroying like block after block after block, and then there's like a bunch of like a gang of flying like dudes in like suits. It was weird, man, and they don't even explain where they come from and who these people are, and they just like the kid finds to the leftover technology and turns his like skateboard into like a rocket racer, and that's the story. But at the same time, they're trying to do this social commentary. It's very weird because the writing is like so poor on one end, and then the writing gets to this point where it's like, wow, that was like a really like kind of a message he was trying to give Spider-Man right there, but it kind of gets lost in all the bad like shtick going on. So yeah, man, it was something because like by the end of the episode, like I don't know if like anyone learned anything, or like I don't know if it even contributed to the overall arc of anything. I think Madam Web appears, and that's it. I may be wrong on that one.
I think the fundamental problem with this episode is that when you don't have any writers of color, and I don't know if that's true or not. But if you were to tell me and you were to ask me to speculate, I would tell you there are probably zero writers of color, specifically black writers, and I don't think you can do this kind of episode unless you have multiple black writers, a black director, and really you're able to couch this properly. I think the problem with this episode, I don't see, this isn't one of those situations where I think you should review bomb this and give this 1 star because oh my god, we're talking about a black person. Like that's not what I'm saying because I think there are certain situations where you can take comic book stories and have them be relevant to somebody's race. Like, I think Spider Man Into the Spider Verse does a much better job of doing maybe not exactly the same sort of thing, but they are playing with some of the same ideas, and I think it works so much better, and it's handled with so much more nuance, and the conversation that we are able to have about it just works out so much better. And I would imagine that as we come to a point where we are going to get a Miles Morales live action Spider Man, I would imagine those conversations are only going to continue, evolve, and hopefully get better. I think the problem with this episode, this is intended to be about Spider-Man, and it feels like we are walking into an after-school special, and it is inappropriate to me to have a school special be a part of an animated show, especially when you have like this bank robbery, you have like the rocket racers, and it's just this very goofy thing that I get why it's in a kids TV show, especially one in the mid '90s. This just I have never felt the mid '90s more than I have in this episode. And believe me, there are some X-Men episodes where we could probably talk about something similar where it feels very mid '90s just in terms of some of the things they're doing, but especially this one, you're definitely getting it. The one thing I will say in favor of this episode, I did like the idea of a precise bank robbery because it made me think back to Beverly Hills Cop 2, and I love Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I don't know if that was like a direct like reference since it just came out in '87, but it just, again, because they're fans of horror movies and stuff. I guess they could, throw in a random comedy comedy movie reference here and there. So that was kind of cool. But again, it was just so bad, man, and I was shocked. I looked it up, and there was no Spider-Man the Animated Series toys for Burger King at the time, and Rocket Racer would have been perfect for that. But alas, it never came to be. So there you go.
I also want to talk about so Felicia, of course, cannot be together with Spider Man. Spider Man once again ending up as a third wheel. We get introduced to the character of Jason Phillips. I totally thought Jason Phillips was the villain. I don't know about you.
Well, with the confusing writing of it all, it made it seem like, wait, who's this guy? Who's this guy, and what does he have to do with anything?
So here's the thing that really bothered me. Jason Phillips is a giant creep who hits on Felicia immediately, and Felicia just goes along with it. I cannot imagine a scenario in 2022 where that's written in an appropriate way.
Oh, for sure. That's totally not the way to write in 2022, for sure.
So I also want to point out that Robert uses science to help stop the racers in just about the lamest way possible. If you were to tell me that this was written in like 2020, 2021 to help convince kids that they should go into STEM, I would believe you because that's how lame this was.
Yeah, it was pretty lame because like even Spider-Man was like, "Oh, how come I didn't think of that?" And I was like, "What?"
I just this oh my god, I could not have hated this episode.
Cringe, 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 cringe.
It's and I knew like in the first 2 minutes I was like, uh-oh. Like I knew it. Like I just knew that this was not going to go well. All right, let's talk about something better. This time we get Spider-Man narrating the episode to start. He always narrates, but it feels particularly important because we basically start with kind of we're going to tell this story a little bit out of order. Spider-Man narrating, and it's raining outside. Peter Parker is being held without bond and is immediately thrown in jail. An explosion goes off, and Peter is knocked out by none other than Spider-Man. Brian, I don't know about you, but it seemed really obvious that it wasn't Spider-Man. And what was the tell?
Oh my god, the chameleon's button. But again, the audience. I mean, okay, the audience know that, but I guess the people in their universe, to be fair, don't know that because they don't really know who the chameleon is because they never really seen him. So I guess for people who don't realize it's Spider-Man or think it is Spider-Man, they could easily be fooled. I'll give the benefit of the doubt in that case, only because we, the audience, know about the button.
Shouldn't Spider-Man just come out and say, "If you see this belt, this is the chameleon," right? Like, just put out a PSA.
Look, I thought that too, but then it turns out he didn't even know that Wilson Fisk was Kingpin, and I thought they established that like a season ago.
That was also really weird to me.
Yeah, I thought they established that, but I guess they established that it's just Wilson Fisk to Peter Parker, but they only call him Kingpin in front of Norman Osborn.
So we also have a little bit of Richard Fisk in this. He offers Peter Parker a job in a flashback. This is the reason that Peter Parker is arrested for basically treason and sedition, all that good stuff. I will say, so I think this episode is very up and down. My favorite scene is Peter quitting being the photographer of the Bugle, Jameson being super pissy, and then saying Peter will come crawling back. And Jameson is right. He's absolutely right.
Well, not only that, I mean, Peter quit, and then he said you're fired. So in that case, he's gonna have to pay him unemployment. So he screwed up either way.
But we know he's super rich based on the 2 episodes ago. So what does it matter?
Yeah, I guess he can't afford I guess he can afford the unemployment. I guess he's so nice to Peter that he yelled at him on purpose to fire him to give him unemployment. I guess because he's so nice.
But if Peter is a freelancer, do unemployment rules still apply?
So then why is he getting fired?
I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like we have a much better understanding of labor laws in 2022 than we did in 1996.
I would agree with you there. Spider-Man runs away from people trying to capture him and the FBI. And Brian, something shocking: the FBI is being grossly incompetent, which I have to tell you is a major surprise. Oh no, wait, it's not, because the gymnasts are suing them for $1 billion, and hope they get every dollar. So anyway, the FBI is grossly incompetent.
Okay, so this is kind of jumping ahead to the next episode, but I once they kind of reveal spoiler that Agent Choi is an agent for Kingpin, I was like, oh my god, this is Departed. Like that, it immediately hit me like Choi is the Matt Damon of the Departed.
So does that mean there's a rat-like character that comes into the Spider-Man universe as well?
See, that's the thing too. I think Norman is the rat.
No, but you know what I mean, right?
I I know.
I mean, the Rat King was in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but what about the Can we get the Molar back? How about him?
Yeah, it just the Departed was very prominent towards the end of the next episode when they revealed the turn. But this whole setup feels like it was like some sort of like cover up, and that Agent Choi was like either the chameleon or it's just someone else because she was just totally going overboard in terms of like rules and regulations. She didn't even read Peter her rights, his rights. He just they put him in cuffs and then he told someone else to read him his rights.
Well, then if Matt Murdock was truly a good lawyer that got this huge retainer, that's literally the first thing he would do. Right? I really love the fact that Matt Murdock gives us the 5-minute version of his story, very similar to the Ben Affleck Daredevil as well as the Netflix series. So I can't imagine we're going to get another version of this told in any of the future MCU material. I mean, I don't know if Daredevil is officially canon, but it kind of feels like we are headed in that direction. So we may not get any more Daredevil origin stories, and that's a-okay with me. Brian, we get the classic Austin Powers mistake as they decide to not let Peter Parker die and just assume that he is going to get killed.
Yeah, classic mistake, especially with Austin Powers. But I just couldn't believe that, like, even after like Peter Parker left, like Matt Murdock continues with his monologue, and he gives another like part of the speech, and it was like, "Who are you talking to, man? Like, there's no one listening to your story. Who are you talking to?" So I just thought it was like so funny because like it made me think of The Incredibles, and then like, are you monologuing? And now to the point where you're monologuing to nobody. So I thought that was hilarious.
So here's my thing, Brian. I think The Incredibles killed monologuing, as it should. I think Austin Powers did a fantastic job of kind of killing that trope where we don't watch them get murdered. Like, I feel like Austin Powers made some positive contributions to cinema and storytelling. Why didn't Walk Hard completely ruin the music biopic, though? Come on. I mean, it literally just. Come on, man. And look, Walk Hard is should be one of the most culturally relevant movies because it literally predicts every fucking musical biopic, and I hate them so much now. And good for Walk Hard. Be more like Walk Hard. We need to destroy the musical biopic.
Listen, Walk Hard has probably the best, or I guess parody, you'd say, parody soundtrack that I've ever heard. Because like if you listen to all those songs, it's like that. God, that sounds like a Bob Dylan song. That sounds like a fucking Beatles song. You know what I mean?
I mean, I feel like I mean, are you talking about soundtrack, or are we counting? Are we counting Weird Al in this?
Soundtracks, because Weird Al, that's his whole genre. I'm talking like, because if I played the Walk Hard soundtrack back in the day at work at Blockbuster, which I probably shouldn't have, but my coworker was like, "Are you sure this is not like Bob Dylan?" I'm like, "Dude, this is the soundtrack to the fake movie, dude." And he's like, "Whoa, dude, it sounds like exactly like Bob Dylan." So, yeah, I know we're sidetracking, but I'm glad you brought up the Dewey Cox story because not a lot of love.
It makes me so mad because the Elvis biopic just came out, and we just continue to do it. Like we had a Sex Pistols show on Hulu. We had the terrible Bohemian Rhapsody. I really want musical biopics to die and never come back.
Well, I don't know. We'll see because if it's gonna help people win Oscars like Jamie Foxx, may not stop for a while.
I mean, are we sure Jamie Foxx deserves an Oscar? I don't know, man. I don't know.
I think him busting out like the actual voice of Ray Charles, that's what won him the Oscar because that's what sold me. He got my vote that year.
I mean, I don't even know if that was his best performance of the year. I think he was better in Collateral.
Oh, we know that. We know that. But
That movie's super underrated, but we may need to do a Michael Mann month at some point because man, that movie is great. I've never watched Black Hat. I need to watch Black Hat. We need to continue our reassessment of Miami Vice. Anyway, Matt Murdock becomes Daredevil. Daredevil is suspicious of Spider-Man, so of course he goes after him. Aunt May gets ill at some point. That really doesn't play into anything that's going. Peter Parker does finally get to change into this costume. Daredevil tries to confront Spider-Man. Henchmen are trying to blow a facility up, but it's evidence, and it's a to be continued to end the week.
at this point, I'm just kind of like, how are Peter Parker and Matt Murdock not recognizing the fact that each one is Spider-Man or Daredevil? Or Daredevil?
Were you hoping for the meme?
Look, because at the next I think it's the next, or one of the next couple episodes, Spider-Man goes like, "I recognize that voice," and I'm like, "You recognize that voice, but you don't recognize Matt Murdock's voice is the same as Daredevil's voice?" Like, there's not even a distinction between the two. One of those comic book things, man. Just one of those comic book things. Because either they do know and they're not saying anything, or they really just don't know and they just are that inept.
Yeah, that's totally fair. That is a good point raised by you. I don't know, man. I feel like people are dumb. I feel like there's a possibility you could get away with it. Like you see Christopher Reeve, you see that we've talked about it, we've reviewed it. It shows up on Twitter. The way that Christopher Reeve like changes his physicality, like I could get away with it. Like people got familiar sounding voices sometimes.
I guess, man. But it was just, it seems so obvious with Daredevil when he says that he had an accident with his eyes and the fact that his lawyer's blind. It's like, I wonder if those two are connected in some way because of their eyes. I don't know.
I mean, they're also in the heat of the moment, so you can make the argument like they're not focusing on that. They're focusing on what they're supposed to be doing, and that's stopping things. So that may be a part of it as well.
It also made me think, like, I wish we had a Daredevil scene in the Spider-Man movie. If they didn't go with the direction they went with and still had him as the lawyer and maybe a plot like this where he needs to, like, you know, get his name, Peter Parker's name cleared. Like, if they would have gone with that, I think we would have had we would have had a Daredevil scene like this for sure.
I would be very curious to know if Daredevil was supposed to have a bigger role in the movie, or even if it was just like as Matt Murdock. I'm very curious to know if he was supposed to have a bigger role. But then because they were able to get Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, that's why gave him just such a small role instead.
Who knows? Because this is a potential for a good Spider-Man movie, like, for sure, as its own. But even with it to be continued and all that stuff, like, you would have to do, like, a backdoor retelling of Matt Murdock plus the story with Spider-Man being framed. So it's a good story.
Well, I think we're gonna see Daredevil and Kingpin in the Echo series on Disney Plus. So that is That is very, very exciting. But I digress. We will be back in 2 weeks, Brian. Next week, Kevin Ford and I will be discussing the latest season of Barry, which is very, very good. I'll just tell you, it's really good. I'm really excited to talk about it with Kevin. 2 weeks from now, we will be back to discuss more about Spider Man. So that's very exciting. And then after that is our Thor review. So much to look forward to these next few weeks.
We were thinking about talking about the boys or something like that, but I guess Jerome gave up, which is fine.
I threw in the towel after 3 weeks. The latest season. I don't even know that the show is particularly worse than the first two seasons, but it just feels like okay, the show is spinning its wheels. Like I don't know that I need to see anything more. Like maybe if there was an end game in mind, pun not intended. Like I don't know. There's a lot of TV, man, and unless you are giving me what I need, I'm gonna be more willing to throw in the towel. Like there are a few shows that this season I've been like, you know what, I'm gonna peace out because I'm not getting what I want from this. So that's what I've done.
And on the other end of that spectrum, I gave up on Miss Marvel after 10 minutes. I couldn't really get into it.
I may force Brian. I may force Brian. Brian, you're gonna have to make a choice. Peacemaker or Ms. Marvel. You're gonna have to choose one of those.
I might actually go with Peacemaker over Miss Marvel because, like, at least that was like,
Because we have not, there has not been Peacemaker discussion in this podcasting network, and I feel like that show is better than anything that Disney Plus has done with Marvel.
I mean, the only person I cared about on that show was the Eagle, so I don't know what that says, but with Miss Marvel, I just feel like it's a total miscast. But I don't know. I love the family. Like, I love them. I love the mom and dad.
A miscast? What are you talking about?
Like, I think the person playing Miss Marvel is just miscast, man. She doesn't have like.
I could not disagree.
I feel like she needs a certain kind of charisma. She doesn't have that charisma, but the parents have.
She absolutely has that charisma. I am.
I think the parents have the charisma, but she doesn't. I love the parents. And then I don't know if Jersey even looks that bright, does it?
It doesn't matter. It's the Jersey City of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I am so glad that somebody finally turned a light on and added some fucking color to this universe. Because everything is gray and looks like a random street in Atlanta. We finally turned some lights on. There's visual panache. There is actual visuals. There's visual storytelling for the first time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Well, I don't know if Jersey's that purple, but I will say this: I do like the opening credits.
The opening credits are great. The whole show, the show is not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the show is perfect. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this would not have been better as a 2-hour movie because it absolutely would. But my goodness, this is easily better. Clears the bar big time over Falcon and the Winter Soldier, over What If, and in an even bigger way over Moon Knight. We will be making some choices. Here's the biggest thing to me is this coming immediately after Moon Knight, which Moon Knight was so bad. The fact that this is following that up actually, I think, helps Ms. Marvel significantly because if it came after Loki, I feel like the bar would be too high. But coming after Moon Knight, I think people are desperate for something better, and I think this is going to deliver.
Well, there you go. So I guess if I have to make a choice at the end of the year, I'll make the choice.
Well, I feel like it's the summer. I feel like things are winding down a little bit. A lot of your Emmy contenders are out of the way. People have watched Stranger Things. I feel like the show's going to get attention, especially if it's good. If it's actually good for a number of weeks, which it has been, then I think there's going to be some momentum. And plus, like, I feel like the fact that we know that she is going to be in a movie very soon. I think that helps significantly as well.
We'll see, because I was having a lot of trouble, but that's just me. That's just me.
Well, Brian, I may have to do a forcing on and make a call here, so we'll figure that out. But for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again in 2 weeks.
So Spider-Man really wanted to hang with the homeboys, huh? Ugh.